Welcome to the 22nd podcast of Traditional Lives, where we research the original Hebrew text to reveal the incomplete translations of the King James Bible. This is part two of our series named Noah's Jonahs. In our previous podcast of the book of Jonah, we have repeatedly revealed the chasm of difference of this story in the original Hebrew text compared to the traditional story from the interpretations and translations of the King James Bible. We named that traditional story God Said Go, Dove Said No. So now let's review part one of this podcast series. In part one, we revealed again that the word dove and the word Jonah are translated from the same Hebrew word. So now we're going to search out the earlier occurrences of this word translated as dove. We learned that the first occurrence of this word is in Genesis 8:8, which is the beginning of the story where Noah released a dove three times from Noah's ark. In that podcast, we also compared Genesis 8:8 with Genesis 1:2, because in these two verses we have both the Spirit of God and a dove, a symbol of the Spirit, hovering or moving upon the faces of the waters. Also, in that podcast, we searched out two Hebrew words in Genesis 8:8, the word translated as the dove and the word translated as if were abated. We learned that both of these words were not consistently translated throughout the Old Testament. We also learned that the word translated as if were abated would be better translated as behold his voice. We then applied our understandings to our modified version of this verse. So now we're ready to reveal Noah's Jonahs part 2. Let's first consider Genesis 7 and 1, where it says, And the Lord said unto Jonah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark. And it continues. Notice in this verse, God didn't tell Noah to go into the ark. He said to come into the ark, which would imply that he's in the ark welcoming Noah and his family. I'm sorry, Noah and his family to join him inside the ark. Another interesting point is we learned in our podcast number 11 the Hebrew alphabet, and that each of these letters has their own meaning and understanding. The letters that spell the word dove, the definition of those letters is the hand that does mighty deeds of the straight up man with the nail, whose life will be revealed. So, by definition of the letters, the word dove is going to reveal our Savior, the straight up man, the sinless man with the nails in the palm of his hands, and those hands did the mightiest deed of all by not coming off that cross, by giving of himself. This is the word dove. So now let's continue our research of Genesis 8 and 8, the first departure of a dove, and let's search out the Hebrew word translated as to see. This word occurs 54 times in the original text, and now you're seeing the 54 verses and how this word was translated in those verses. You'll see by researching that it's fairly consistent. So either these 54 translations are near 100% correct or they're near 100% incorrect. So the first point of interest is that there is already a Hebrew word that occurs 126 times that is translated as to see or seeing or you see throughout the entire Old Testament into the King James. So now let's remove the first two letters from this word to reveal a very common word that is very much used in the church community. This word occurs 22 times, and the second occurrence of this word is in Genesis 9:12. And then God said, This is the token of the covenant, and it continues. Let's search out all 22 occurrences of this word, which is a root noun that's contained in our word that's translated in Genesis 8:8 as to see. It's translated as the token in Genesis 9:12, and now we're seeing the other 21 occurrences. Yes, now you can see that 12 of those occurrences is translated as a sign. The word a sign, where we say this is a sign of the end times, a sign of this, a sign of the covenant, is a very common phrase in the church community. How would we see the researching of a sign of the covenant or a sign of the end times differently if these other 10 verses were consistently translated as a sign, as these other 12 were translated as a sign also? So now we're seeing some discrepancies in this word being translated as to see. It would probably be more accurately translated as to see the sign. Yes. Another interesting point of this word is if you remove the lamed, the word should be translated as see, right? Well, we've already seen that the last three words are the word sign. And so now in Genesis 45 and 12, it says, And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. In our research of this word with the four letters, we're convinced from other occurrences of this word that it's more accurately translated as are the ones seeing. And the key takeaway of this verse is this is Joseph telling his brothers and declaring to his brothers who he is. They've heard him talk many times and still didn't know who he was, but now they're going to see. Their eyes are the ones seeing him talk, and by seeing his voice, they know it's him. Again, they didn't know it was him by hearing his voice. They knew it was him by seeing his voice, by seeing him speak and declaring who he is. Wow, that's different. So yes, let's continue and look at Genesis 8:8, and now our change of that verse would be like this. Also he sent forth the dove from with him to see the sign, to behold the voice, behold the waters from on the face of the ground. The waters were on the face of the ground, so he could not hear or see the voice as he flew across the waters. Glory. We're going to continue searching out the three dove stories of Noah in our next podcast. Glory to the King.